Next. Anybody else want to address the council? This is your last opportunity. If not, do we have any council members that have anything? Okay.
Yes. Public comment section. I want to apologize personally to the Christian Reporter News. It seems that they've been dropped from the blog that we receive daily as a news source, and I don't know the reason, and I would like for us to look into it. And I'm sorry that that has happened. And also, I want to make sure that that news source is on the city clerk's agenda to send notices of meetings and the types that have, because I don't want to single out any news source.
That's all right. Last week after I was affirmed, I preached for about 10 minutes, and one of the things I was preaching about was that when any council member or myself asked for an item to be placed on the agenda, we want it on the agenda. We had 2 items on the agenda this week that were dropped. And I think Mr. Wardlaw has some comments he wanted to make about that, so this is your chance.
Yes, may I defer to Ms. Farmer to start off first, because she also had an item that was not addressed on the agenda, and then if, all right with you, Mr. Mayor, I'll go second.
Okay. Be happy to. I clearly recall at the June 18th meeting that I had requested additional information with reference to the hickory to be placed on the very next agenda, which is today. That item is item 12, an update and presentation of the Hickory Aquifer water supply, which it is my understanding that we have to be very specific, and this is exactly what was on the agenda on the 18th, the wording. So therefore, I couldn't talk about things because I was stopped by legal, specifically those items, and it's not, again, it is not worded to where we can talk about it in public, and I'm very unhappy about that. What does it take for a council member who is supposed to set the agenda to get the things on the agenda?
Ma'am, did you have that discussion with Daniel?
Yes, I did, but I also had a discussion during the council meeting, which is on tape and viewed as wanting to see the price that we had extended on the hickory to this date and what the proposal was when we accepted the bid as to what the cost would be. I specifically asked for a comparison of those figures. That's not the way it's worded on here, and therefore we can't talk about it.
Are you talking about treatment costs?
I'm talking about the entire project.
Okay.
So it's, I don't have anybody to ask because Daniel's not here, but this states on this agenda exactly what it did on the 18th, and I was stopped from talking about things by our attorney. And I made it very clear, and Mr. Hirschfield backed me up, that that's all we're asking to see is a breakdown of what we awarded the bid on as to the estimated cost, and compare that to what we have spent to date. And we couldn't get into it then, and because it's worded exactly the same, I don't want to use the word assume, but I would assume we still can't talk about it, and that angers me.
Mrs. Farmer, if you look at the background, staff did use the same caption for the item. However, if you look at the background on the cover memo, it talks about you asking for the item detailing that you requested the term dates pertaining to the Hickory project and the engineering firm. It does cover your request. This item does satisfy what you requested. Yes, ma'am.
In the background.
Ms. Farmer, we'd be glad to provide additional information if what you see today does not satisfy your interest in knowing. We'd be glad to follow up.
And we anticipate the presentation will cover the material that is presented in the memo, which is public.
Okay, then explain to me why I couldn't talk about it last week. Were y'all not prepared? I mean, the wording on the agenda is exactly the same as it was.
Staff didn't have the information perhaps, is my recollection.
So, fine,
But we are-
then we'll talk, when we get to that item, we'll find out, but that is my complaint about the, for my part of the agenda.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to address those issues shortly.
Okay.
Mr. Wardlaw.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to brag on you a little bit, but I'm also going to request that I have an adequate amount of time to explain this distasteful situation that we're in and make sure that all the members of the council understand what problems that the council is facing getting their items on the agenda. And of course, this has got to stop because if we can't get our items on the agenda timely, then in effect, got a mosquito here, then all the voters in the city of San Angelo will be disenfranchised because we will not be able to get our items heard and taken care of. And so I'm not pleased, to say the least. Mr. Mayor, at the last council meeting, you made for you what I thought was a very eloquent speech. And you made it clear. You made it clear to me, and I think everybody in this thing that was in attendance here, that there would be no more games, that when council people requested items to be placed on the agenda, that they would be placed on the agenda. Well, let me bring you up to date with what's happened since then. The date that you made that great speech was June the 25th, which was last Tuesday. On that particular day, after the city council meeting was over, I went over to the city clerk's office with a typed letter requesting the placement on the agenda of two particular items having to do with consultants. And in that, it was requested, in the letter, it was requested that the item be placed on the agenda for today, July the 2nd. And I told Alicia that I would check back on Thursday to make sure those items had in fact been placed on the agenda. Because what the public may not understand is if you don't get your request in within 72 hours, you would be in violation of the Open Meetings Act for notice to the public, and you have to have that information in timely. Okay, on the next day, Wednesday, the following day after I placed my letter at the clerk's office, I did get a draft agenda, and my items were included in the agenda, and they had an item number like 12 and 13 or 11 and 12. I've got it here, I'm not looking at it. So that looked like we were on track. So then on Thursday, as I told Alicia on Tuesday, that I would call and check and make sure the item was on the agenda. I did in fact call. I was told the item was still, two items were still on the agenda involving consultants. And then the next, no calls from anybody, did not talk to anybody, did not get permission from anybody to move my items or take them off the agenda. And the next thing I know, Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock when I get home from doing various things, I pull out my agenda and my items have disappeared. Totally, not to be found on there anywhere, and they're not on the items, they're not on the agenda. If the council people will look, they're not on the agenda at this point in time. And also, there's no mention made of these items in the executive session portion, which is a little bit relevant here in a minute, but not totally relevant. So anyway, I'm going to do everything in my power with my one vote and my sometimes persuasive ability to get this stopped once and for all. To me, if this is allowed to continue, Mr. Mayor, it'd just be kind of like in the Charlie Brown Peanuts comic strip where Charlie Brown's always trying to kick a field goal or an extra point, and Lucy's always the holder. And every time he comes up to kick, she pulls the ball away. I can't represent my constituents, and I can't do good things for this town if I don't know that when I ask for something to be placed on the agenda, that it's going to be done so with no questions or permission of mine or notice or anything. Now, let me tell you what's going on. You're gonna hear some people say that I'm off base. Well, I've been an attorney for a long time, and I'll stipulate I'm well past my prime as an attorney, but I can go to the law library, which I have, and I researched this, and I am absolutely 100% right on this. And the taking of these items off the agenda is wrong. There's no justification for it, and it's put me in a position not to have these items heard, or they may try to make me go into executive session, which is going to be in violation of criminal law and other law on open meetings, taking this item to executive session. There is no notice in the agenda that this item or anything like it is on the executive session closed agenda. That is a requirement of the law, clearly a requirement. Also, additionally, the items that I requested are not executive closed session agenda items. There's only a limited number of things that you can put on the closed session agenda in the state of Texas, and there's 3 subsections: 551.071, 551.072, and .074. And if you don't fit in one of these 3 categories, then you're in violation of the law if you try to have a closed session hearing on something. And that's what's being asked of me right now, and I'm not going to do it. But also, let me point out even further that some people obviously don't know, and that is, if an item is even in fact allowable to be put in executive session to be heard away from the public, the city council can order that item to be put out in open session. That's just if something is eligible for the executive session, that's just an option of the council. That's not a directive of the law. And because the law this is the Open Meetings Act. Well, and let me just read. Obviously, some people haven't done their homework either. Let me just read. Let me just read the Attorney General's opinion. Governmental body may not meet in closed session, which is what they're asking me to do today, and these other good friends of mine, to discuss employment of independent contractor such as engineering, architectural, or consulting firm. Texas Attorney General's opinion, number MW129. So what I intend to do in the future, and I hope Ms. Farmer and others will support me, is that we're going to have to take whatever action, however harsh it is or however unpleasant it is, to get this stopped once and for all. And I'm going to make an attempt at today I'm going to hand the city clerk some other. I'm going to reissue my request that these be placed on the open session for next meeting, and I'm also going to place something else on there that if it's not placed on there, then they're going to be. I'm going to seek repercussions, and I'm going to try to get this straight. And also, unless Ms. Farmer, she's upset too, and I think the only thing we can do today as a remedy is just take some of these other items off the open agenda so that people will understand if we can't get our items on there, we're the employer, not the employee, that they're not going to get their items on the agenda either. So I guess we'll just decide how we want to handle this. But anyway, this type of activity, which is insubordinate to the declarations of the mayor that he made clear, it's also disrespectful to the mayor, and it's disrespectful to all these council people to be taking these items off the agenda. And so I'm sorry it happened, and I didn't get on the council to be fighting like this. If I wanted a bunch of fights, I would still be out there trying lawsuits. So, I hope the council will support me, and we'll just see what happens. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, now.
Yes, ma'am.
I think in a nutshell what this is saying is I'm only as good as my information. am asked to make decisions that are put forth on these agendas. And in order for me to make that decision, I need information beforehand as to what I'm making a decision on. You know, if there's something in the consent agenda or on the regular agenda that I don't know about, hasn't been discussed with me, staff hasn't provided enough information, how can we as a council possibly make the right decision that the citizens have entrusted us to do? This is the perfect time, it's new council, to get back to transparency in our operation. You know, the consent agenda, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask that we pull items 2, 4, and 3, and 7, 2, 3, and 7, because I have no knowledge or information of this beforehand. And one of these is a $1 million decision.